Get in, nerds. We are explaining Hearts of Iron 4. Today we're going to talk about the National Focus and Decisions system. So in order to access your National Focuses tree menu, you click your flag up here. This brings up your political screen where you got your laws and government and whatnot. And you click this button that says Select a National Focus. When you've got a National Focus running, you can click this button at any time to get to this menu. But here's what a National Focus does. It lasts for a certain amount of time, typically 70 days, and it's going to have certain requirements. While it's running, it's going to cost you 1 political power per day. So as you can see, I'm gaining 2.25 political power per day. It's going to cost 1 of them. So every National Focus costs 70 political power, typically. Some National Foci are longer or shorter than that, but they're the exception rather than the rule. For countries that are not that don't have specifically storylines designed for them, which includes a lot of countries in South and Central America, and then a lot of countries and then the independent countries in the Middle East, Afghanistan, I want to say Nepal and Tibet. I think that might be it. Most of the other countries are going to have a designed National Focus tree, but there is a generic one for countries that don't have one yet. They've been adding more and more National Focus trees, and those are unlocked as part of purchasing DLC. So if you only buy the base game, only the majors are going to have their own National Focus tree. So that's UK, France, Germany, Italy, USSR, United States, and Japan. Anyway, so that's what a National Focus is. It's a thing you work on for 70 days, costs you 70 political power, and at the end of it, you get a benefit. And it costs 1 political power per day. You don't have to pay all 70 as soon as you start it. So let's take a look at the UK's tree, and this will allow us to see how the National Focus tree works. This is a tree. You can only do each National Focus. So these are National Foci. Let me start there. These options here, and they tell you, number 1, how long they take to complete, what their requirements are, and what happens at the end of them. So, for example, limited rearmament here has no requirements. It adds 4 civilian factories and the building slots to produce them in 2 in Aberdeenshire and 2 in Sussex. And once that has been completed, it's going to unlock all of the National Foci under it, and that's what these lines represent here. So you can see a motorized army gives you 1 research bonus for trucks, and that has a completion time of 75 days. And we can see in red here, requires limited rearmament, and that means you have to have completed the National Focus above it first. You also get these foci here like secret weapons. This requires all of the following: the Mod Committee and Royal Ordnance Factories. So the Mod Committee is here, and Royal Ordnance Factories is here. You need to have both of these completed in order to be able to get secret weapons. So that's kind of how those work. That's how the lines work. There's also one other type of line that I want to introduce you to, and that is the either-or line. The branches are mutually exclusive. You can see an either-or line between 2 or more National Foci if you can only pick one of them. In this case, the options are Reinforce the Empire and Revisit Colonial Policy. I'm going to read you the descriptions of those to give you a sense of why these are mutually exclusive. So, Reinforce the Empire. It has a completion time of 70 days. It has no prerequisites. You can't do it if you're communist. You can't do it if you have 0 subject nations. And you can't do it if you've already done Revisit Colonial Policy. Its effect is it gives you plus 10% stability. And here's the description. Our empire is vast, and despite our power, weakly defended. To combat this, we need to encourage imperial patriotism throughout the realm. And then we see if decolonization has not been achieved within 2 years of becoming communist, a civil war will start. That was something that was added in the Democracies DLC, Man the Guns, that has a lot of Britain content in it. The other one here is Revisit Colonial Policy. It requires you to be fully independent. You need to be either democratic or communist, and you can't have completed Reinforce the Empire. Its effects are you lose 5% stability, popularity of communism goes up by 50%, and you get 80 political power. And you have this notification here, same as under Reinforce the Empire. If decolonization has not been achieved within 2 years of becoming communist, a civil war will start. The description here is, the times are changing. It is clear that independence movements will only continue to spring up across the empire and in ever stronger incarnations. If we do not wish to be forced into pouring increasingly vast resources into suppressing these movements, then we must acknowledge that our empire has run its course and now must be allowed to find its own path into the world. So, as you can see, Reinforce the Empire is about keeping the British Empire, and Revisit Colonial Policy is about not keeping the British Empire, and it ends down here with decolonization. So that's a whole. That's basically what these do. And so, as you can see, national foci are progressive. They start with basic things, and they move forward to more complicated or interesting ones. For example, the great payoff to Reinforce the Empire down here is the Imperial Federation. Hold the Imperial Conference and the Imperial Federation. Hold the Imperial Conference lets you do a massive conference of all of the dominions, and what that does is it lets you shell out some political points to get big bonuses with all of them. On the other hand, down here, the payoff for completing all of these foci are decolonization. And as you can see based on these notifications up here, if you become communist as the UK, you basically have to do all this, or you're going to have yourselves a civil war, and it's not going to be good. So that's how national foci work. So at this point, at this stage in Hearts of Iron 4, if you've built up if you built up your DLC collection, most of the countries that saw a lot of military action in World War II, with the exception of Brazil, are going to not have, with the exceptions of Brazil, Iran, and Iraq, are going to have a non-generic custom-made national focus tree. Brazil did send a force to assist the Allies, an expeditionary force, and then Iran and Iraq were invaded by Great Britain during the war, basically for use as for shipping arms to the Soviet Union. You can scroll out on your national focus. You can scroll back in. I'm just using the mouse wheel here, so you're not going to be able to visibly see it. But if you scroll all the way out, this lets us get a sense of the size of the United Kingdom focus tree. Believe it or not, this is not one of the larger focus trees in the game. Probably the largest is going to go to, I'm guessing probably the Soviet Union. Let me take a look at their focus tree. By the way, if you don't have any units selected and you right-click country, that brings up their politics. That brings up their diplomacy menu. This is the Soviet focus tree. It's large, huge. There's a lot of different options here. So for most major powers, such as the UK is, this focus tree is going to be how you're going to be shaping and changing your politics. So over here on the right, we have another pair of mutually exclusive foci. One is Steady as She Goes, which increases democracy support and stability for a year. And the other is A Changing Course, and this is So, Steady as She Goes is the democratic path, and this provides options for global defense, the ahistoric path, and home defense, the historic path. And then over here is A Changing Course, and this provides options for ahistoric paths. The King's Party is the path to monarchy, Organize the Black Shirts is the path to fascism, and, concessions to the trade unions is the path to communism. And it might be fairly obvious based on just sort of the visual design of these trees, the way that's going to go. What with a lot of red and stars and hammers and sickles over here, and us having a big old eagle with fasces here, and us having a fancy lad and a crown over here. Although this path is available to both unaligned and Organize the Black Shirts, but that is what it is. That's an interesting little tidbit about the British set. So if you go right with Britain, you can go either to monarchy and get this stuff and this stuff, or you can go fascism and get this stuff and this stuff. So That's the way national foci work. And so every 70 days, I'm going to be picking a new national focus, and I'm going to be moving from the top of the tree to the bottom. And the bottom is where a lot of the good stuff is. So what sort of things are in the national focus tree? Well, here there's some factories. Here there's a reduction to consumer goods factories factor, which is a very important thing that lets you get more out of your civilian industry. Here's some factories down here. But they're sneaky factories. Basically, when it grants 4 building slots and 4 military factories in a total of 2 states when entering a war. So it doesn't immediately get the factories created, but they get created as soon as there's a war. Industrial effort, this gives us 2 research bonuses for industry. That lets us research 2 100% research bonuses for industry. That lets us research 2 industrial techs 100% faster, which is very, very good, because industrial techs are very important. Down here we get just a bunch more military factories. So this is all our industrial tree, and this is a research slot, and I'll explain how research slots work later. Over here, we're doing things like getting bonuses. So this one gives us 10% stability. This one allows us to accumulate some Army, Navy, and Air experience. Those Army, Navy, and Air experience up here, which can be used on a variety of things. And encourage the colonial elite gives us a 7% bonus to research, and this exists forever. These bonuses don't go away unless it says somewhere that they do. Over here we've got some foci, like this one gives us stability and democracy support. This one gives us extra political power gain, war support, and reduces democracy support for a year, which is wild and cool. Organize the Black Shirts gives you 200 political power. That's this mana up here, which is useful for a bunch of different things. The King's Party is rather complicated, and many of these are related to event chains. So, for example, one of the requirements for the King's Party is Edward VIII marries Wallis Simpson. Edward VIII is the current king of the United Kingdom. In the historical path, he abdicated in favor of his brother George. But if, in order to make the King's Party and turn the United Kingdom into an absolute monarchy, you need to not have that happen. And there's a whole event chain related to that you'll see if we end up doing a run as the UK, or if you said get the game yourself and play out in a historical run. So that's national foci. They do a bunch of different things, but they're very useful. And those tie in to the decision system. This is your events and decisions menu. It's going to list decisions grouped by category. So I'm just going to take you through what the UK has, and you can see kind of what's going on here. So I will say some of these are generic and some of them are country specific. So just as one example, the political actions set can have some actions that are unique to certain countries. In fact, for us, giving refuge to German and Italian scientists is a unique one for Great Britain and the United States. But these... the rest of these actions are basically available to all different countries. You'll notice that countries that are democratic have access to anti-fascist and anti-communist raiding and banning fascism and communism. If you're fascist, you're going to be able to ban and raid democracies. If you're democratic and communists. If you're communist, you'll be able to raid democratic and fascist. So it's just, these are your actions for controlling your own politics and reducing the strength of political groups that are not you. For the UK, we're 97% democratic and 2% fascist, 1% communist, so we're not necessarily going to need to worry about that at all. But, there are countries that's going to be pretty different about. Poland, as an example, has a pretty varied political scene. So even though they're not aligned with the Senation Party as their primary one, there's a lot of support for democracy, communism, and fascism in Poland. So that's interesting. This is how you interact with that. Improve working conditions is a very important button. It has, I want to say, a 2-year cooldown, but I could be wrong about that. Description here is factory work is hard and fraught with many hazards. Improving the conditions for our factory workers will reduce output in the short term, but the long-term benefits are worth it. This lasts for 100 days. It increases consumer goods factories factor by 10%, which is not great, and reduces factory output by 10%, which is also not great, but having a 0.5% stability per week for half a year is really good. Increases your stability, and stability is very important. So, anyway, you can see these decisions are grouped here. Here it explains how much political power it costs to do this decision. So, for example, improving working conditions costs 100 political power, and that you have to pay at the beginning of the decision. So, improved working conditions is not accessible to us right now, and you know that because it's read it out here. This button just toggles notifications, so I can toggle a notification for this decision, or I can toggle it for this whole group. If I want this notification to appear whenever there's decisions available, I can toggle that on and off for the notifications, and then this button is the button that is go ahead and do this decision. Make this decision, or different places take this decision. And that's how you actually fire the decisions. If I click this button here, you can probably hear that clicking. If you can't, it's not a tragedy. Nothing's going to happen, only this one actually does stuff. And if I press this one, for example, this is going to cost me a bunch of political power. I'm not going to do that one yet. I'll show you. Actually, I'll do this one. Let's go ahead and unpause the game, and we'll let it tick over to the next day. So now I've got 10 political power. I'm going to press this button in the Gateway to Europe, but first I'm going to explain what the Gateway to Europe is. So this is a unique decision set to the United Kingdom and Germany. As you can see, the little image here is two hands tugging a Dutch flag one way or the other. Description is, the Germans are using the Dutch as a backdoor, circumventing our blockade by using neutral Dutch shipping and ports to pass trade through. If we wish to make our blockade more successful, we must bend the Dutch to our will. These are our influence points. The United Kingdom has 0 and Germany has 0. And these are influence points that the United Kingdom and Germany have over Dutch trade policy. The description of this decision is demand reduced Dutch trade with Germany. The Dutch must be brought to heel and fall in line with the trade restrictions placed upon Germany. Certainly they would not want us to include them in those restrictions. In order to do this, we need to be democratic, and Germany needs to be fascist. If either of us change direction, this Gateway to Europe ceases to function. Active for 20 days, effects when removed. If the Netherlands caves to our demands, we will receive an amount of political power equal to the total amount invested by all Gateway to Europe participants. Currently, this amounts to political power 0. So this lasts 20 days, and if I hit this button here, we're going to see this turn dark blue here with a stamp on it for done, and this down here is a progress bar. So if I unpause and let it tick over into the next day, you can see we've got a little bit of progress here. And if we do it again, you can see the progress bar is continuing to progress down the bar. And you can see how many days it's got left by looking at this number here. So, events and decisions let you interact with a bunch of different things in the game, a bunch of different mechanics. So, just as an example, all the countries that have signed the London Naval Treaty have the Naval Treaties options, and you can do things like withdraw from the Naval Treaties. If you're democratic, that requires 150 political power and requires world tension to be at a certain amount. If you're a fascist, I think it's 25. Alternatively, if you are fascist, you can cheat on the Naval Treaties. Communists might be able to as well, but I'm not sure. I don't think any of the baseline signatories of the London Naval Treaty are communist at game start, so I'm not sure quite how that works. Other things, propaganda efforts are kind of country-specific. They depend on certain situations. These let you get increased war support, which is very good for staying in a war in the long term. Support China decision. This is a decision that gives us war support and lets us faff about in Southeast Asia to help China defeat Japan. Prospecting for resources. This develops resources in different areas in exchange for using a bunch of civilian factories for a long time. So we got all kinds of decisions here. And there are going to be a bunch of decisions that interact with the national foci in interesting ways. And country-specific menus are going to appear here. So, for example, Italy has a menu where there's a kind of a balance of power between Mussolini and the Grand Council of Fascism. So that kind of tug-of-war mechanic appears up here. Switzerland has another one between the central executive and the cantons, the executive committee and the cantons. It's probably not called the executive committee. It's probably called something else, but I forget. I think it might say Federal Assembly. That's what it is. I don't think that's it. I think the executive committee is like 6 people or something. Anyway, Switzerland has a really interesting political system, and I wish we could get into it, but that'll have to be a topic for its own series. Anyway, let's see. We got a little bit more time. So let's talk about... Let me see. What else is a good thing to talk about? Can I cover text? And tell you what. I think that's all we're gonna do for events and decisions and national foci for now. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this out, and we'll have this be a nice short 20-minute video. And next time I'll come in and I'll talk about tech. I've had a good time. I hope you've had a good time, and I'll see you all on the other side.